It's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels. He was an incredibly popular governor, and so it didn't surprise anyone in Indiana and the rest of the country that he would pursue a higher office, namely that of president of Purdue. And he was also, if those of you remember, the State of the Union address, not the immediate previous one, but he had the honor of delivering the Republican response to President Obama's State of the Union address a few years ago, and he spoke for 10 minutes. Remarkably, he never in those 10 minutes did he have to reach for a glass of water. Okay, I'm going to be serious now. That's part of the show. Anyway, Mitch Daniels has been a dedicated public servant who's brought real results to Indiana. He's turned the state's deficit into a surplus. He's overhauled the state's education system to a better playing field for all students, and he set all of Indiana on the same zone, the same time zone. And he's often going across political grain, but he's demonstrated they place the interests of the people of his state above all those things. Despite the cuts in government programs, he's doubled the number of caseworkers for Indiana's child protective services. He's recognized the importance of continuing support for the clean energy sector in the United States, and Indiana has attracted a booming wind industry. And in 2011, Governor Daniels signed a pledge for Indiana to derive 10% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2025. So now, as president of Purdue, he has the great responsibility of guiding the next generation to take the lead in solving our most pressing energy and environmental challenges. So we all look forward to hearing what you have to say. Help me welcome President Mitch Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Friends of a strong, energetic America, appreciate the chance to be here. Occasions like this, I generally begin with greetings from my beloved Indiana, which I describe as a land of surprises. South Bend's in the north, North Vernon's in the south. French Lick is not what you were hoping it was. I've been asked by the organizers to say a few words about, or at least use as a point of departure, the state of scientific, technological, mathematical education in America, STEM education, as we're now all fond of calling it. And obedient to that charge, I will say a few words about it, but then I hope to broaden the subject just briefly before turning you over to someone better known and more erudite who will follow me. I doubt I need to document the woeful state of numeracy of scientific, technical learning among our citizens at all levels, but most important and tellingly among our younger citizens. So I will not burden you, as I could have, with a slideshow or a realm of statistics. My father in his last years was in an assisted living facility, and I visited him over there one time and said, making small talk, I said, Dad, I recently read in a magazine that in places like this, the ratio of women to men is 3.9 to 1. My father said, that is the most useless statistic I have ever heard in my life. At 85, I guess it was. But maybe I'll just mention a few numbers that will remind you of what you already know. Namely, we've got a long way to go. At the most recent measurement, fewer than a third American 8th graders had what is called a basic command of math. That is the lowest tier or lowest categorization in the international test that is given. What's basic, you ask? Examples are to use an average, to use a mean to solve a problem, to use a measuring cup to describe a given fraction, or to solve a simple story involving computing with money even with the benefit of the calculator. And fewer than a third of our 8th graders could manage tasks like that. The other end of the spectrum, fewer than a fourth of our 12th graders have achieved what is called proficiency, the highest standard. And it's no surprise when you consider that nationally, fewer than 30% of our high school physics and chemistry teachers majored in either of those subjects. In my home state, we've attempted to deal with this in a variety of ways. You'll no longer get a license to teach those subjects in Indiana if you didn't major in one of those subjects. It's acceptable to have taken pedagogical courses up to a certain level, but we have embraced the radical notion that you're going to teach math, you ought to know a little math. We have welcomed to the teaching ranks. We were the first state, fortunately, chosen by the Woodrow Foundation, welcome mid-career physicists, chemists, biologists, and other skilled technical people and people of scientific background from business, from the military, from every walk of life you can imagine, whose hearts have called them to teaching. We've opened the door for them to get a master's in 1 year and go straight to the classroom, as long as they'll commit to teach our young people for a while longer. We've done things large and small. I raised some money to offer, we still offer at $10,000, the largest science prize, science fair winner prize in America as far as I know. Now, in my new endeavor at Purdue University, we hope to pursue our contributions to this national need as aggressively as we can. It's in keeping with Purdue's tradition, in particular, as a land-grant school, but with special emphasis these days. I want to teach a new acronym, by the way. We don't say STEM at Purdue, we say STEAM. We insert an A for agriculture, which many of you will know is as technology intensive a realm of endeavor as we may have these days. I would submit every bit as much as energy. And at Purdue, we are proud to be home to 2 of the last 4 World Food Prize winners, so loosely termed the Nobel Prize of Literature. My new colleagues there see in the not distant future corn half as tall as today, but with twice the kernels per ear, and therefore with a much reduced environmental footprint. They see self-driving tractors that row by row in real time will plant the right seed, biologically speaking, for the nutrients and the condition of the soil, will fertilize it appropriately and only appropriately, and later on in the season will spray with the same limited, only necessary quantity. But our focus at Purdue is equally and always has been on the rest of the acronym. We graduate more engineers and students in technical fields each year right now than any other school in the country. 53% of the degrees we conferred last year went to engineering, science, and technology students. I looked at the list of the top 10 degrees as measured by the marketplace. We offer them all. If you take airline pilots and actuaries out, and we're pretty good at those 2 things, all the rest are in disciplines you would recognize, and we think Purdue excels at them. We will add over 100 new engineering faculty in the next 5 years because we think this is where our greatest contribution to society can be. Happy to take applications in the lobby out afterward if any of this excites somebody here. And most of all, we're trying to build a culture of invention and impact and entrepreneurism at our school. Just last week, in what I thought was a small deal, but may actually be somewhat larger than I imagined, we told all our undergrads that any intellectual property or any potentially patentable discovery that comes out of their work is theirs, not the university's. And we want to encourage everybody from the youngest undergrad to the most senior researcher to invest themselves and commit themselves to the job of transferring the learning and the brilliance that's abundant on that campus, as it on so many, into the betterment of society. And we're going to worry a lot less about what the university owns and a lot more about moving into commerce or into the world around us, the genius that abides at Purdue. We imagine that the university will come out all right in the long run if we do that. Now, I guess the other thing I want to say before I go is that we don't believe, or I'll certainly speak for myself, that it is not enough simply to prepare students who are expert in the STEM or STEAM disciplines. We want to produce for society, I'll say, STEM citizens, people who lift their head up from the research bench or stick it out of the lab long enough to participate and to help their fellow citizens understand the issues of our time. Every student at Purdue is now encouraged, virtually required, to have a leadership experience every year. Could be a service club, could be a student activity, but we virtually insist that they do that. We want to make sure they know enough economics to know that nations whose private sector does not grow vigorously ultimately condemn themselves to second-rate status. Enough history to know that nations who borrow and ultimately cheapen their currency in an attempt to evade paying their debts always run on the rocks. Certainly enough sense of risk and benefit to judge for themselves and help their fellow citizens judge the trade-offs that are part of life in a democracy, and to see the technologies and the disciplines in which they are expert in the broader context of society. Humanity's never lived in an era that needed technologically credible civic leadership more than today. And in one other potentially useful statistic you probably know, my last tally shows the Senate, U.S. Senate with 45 lawyers and 1 engineer, and U.S. House with 128 lawyers and 2. I'll just give you 2 examples that for my money are important for people like our students, people like this audience, to be heard on. The best break, as far as I can tell, the American and even the world economy has gotten in perhaps since the invention of the silicon chip is the breakthroughs in extraction technology that I know people in this audience contributed to. Thank you very much. You have once again exposed the fallacy of extrapolation, once again embarrassed the sort of Malthusian thinking that we're going to run out of this and run out of that. Human ingenuity has won again, at least potentially. And the upside is huge. Every time I see it quantified, somebody's bumping it up a little. But we're talking cautiously in the order of 1 to 2% of GDP, the jobs, the change in the trade balance. In our part of America, the resurgence of manufacturing this is likely to make possible. Very importantly, the government revenue, so desperately needed, that could come from that kind of incremental growth and the benefits for our national security. This should be the easiest call. That when I say this, the optimization, maximization of this possibility, supported by public policy at all levels, should be the easiest call since, the Keystone Pipeline. Oh, wait a minute. We got that wrong, too. Now, I've talked at great length to the people at Purdue. You know, I feel confident in saying to lay audiences that this is a great course for our country. The problems, where they exist at all, are mitigatable, are easily addressable. You know, let's get on with it. And when the University of Hollywood produces a product that is full of bunk, somebody in a crowd like this ought to accept the responsibility to speak up and debunk it. Now, the second example I would give has to do with topic A of the day, I guess, and the federal budget. I get an email a day right now from people in higher ed, my associations to which we belong, We read horror stories every morning now in the paper about this dreaded sequester business. I'll just say I decline, I hope you'll pardon me if I decline to join the hysteria. A 2% reduction in a federal budget that has been growing by double digits year on year on year is not an unmanageable thing. A reduction in the upward trend from 14% to 12% over the next few years is, simply not draconian, certainly not in the context of the danger we face from the debts we've piled up and those we've scheduled for ourselves. We're talking about the NSF at 2010 levels, and we were not starving in 2010. Now, is this a smart way to begin the process of fiscal integrity in this country? Of course not. But we have to start somewhere. And I'll just say that debt and slow growth, debt and a national economy barely moving along at 1.5 or so, which we did last year, is a lot bigger threat to the R&D that needs to happen in energy and in these other areas, to the basic investments we should make. It's a lot bigger threat, honestly, than this ham-handed sequester that may well happen. The biggest threat to the budgets, I think, are very important, that support a lot of the work going on in this room and in the places represented in this room, is not this sequester, it's Medicare growing at more than 60% year on year, already part of a complex of entitlement spending that's close to 2/3 of the budget. The biggest threat to the graduates who will pick up a diploma coming across the stage at Purdue in a couple, 3 months is not the $27,000 a year they may owe in student loans. It's the $750,000 they already owe each for the debts their elders have racked up for them. So you're about to hear from a great, I will say, STEM citizen. And Boone Pickens has been vocal and on questions that are of enormous consequence to us all, and he's been right on so many of them. And I will just say to you on behalf of our university, and I hope we are typical of many, we are proud to try to prepare the leaders of tomorrow, the engineers, the scientists, the chemists and physicists, and the mathematicians on whom our human progress depends. We'll work hard to prepare those leaders, and we simply implore those who are already leaders. I'll never see a room with more of them, with a heavier concentration than right here. You just make sure there's a country, a great country worth their leading when their time comes. Thank you very, very much.